because obviously I've had to move it a few times. I appreciate the flexibility. Thank you. So we will be sharing this with people who signed up and couldn't make the new time. I'll just give people a couple more minutes and then we will crack into it.
Is this a jalapeno thing? This is so small. That one?
Stop. Okie dokie, we've got a lot to get through and I want to ensure that I have time for questions. Now, because I kept it to a nice small group because I want you all to feel comfortable asking questions. So if you don't mind at any point, pop something in the chat. If it's topical, I'll answer it at the time. If not, I'll answer them all at the end, but do please ask questions to make this nice and engaging for everybody. Now, this is going to be quite a basic entry-level start into how to build a bit of a marketing strategy. There is a lot to a marketing strategy, obviously, and this is only going to be an hour long. I'm not going to be able to cover everything in the depth to which you may want it covered, but we will make do, again, ask questions, and we will do subsequent masterclasses. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen, and we're going to kick off now. Okay, so we're going to talk about building a marketing strategy, and a marketing strategy is a lot more than just social media or PR or whatever promotional thing you are doing. It's a lot more. It's about who you stand for, who your audience is, what is going on in the market around you, what your competitors are doing, what are your marketing objectives with this marketing strategy. A lot of people will say we want to do this, but they won't know how to actually measure whatever it is they want to do. What are the strategies and tactics you're going to use? And that's where your social media and your PR comes in. What is the budget, if you have any? Not all marketing costs money, but certainly a lot of it does. How will you measure that success? And what if it doesn't work? Because a lot of the time it doesn't, and that's okay. Why won't you change? Technical error. There we go. Okay, vision, mission, purpose, and values. A lot of people get confused what the difference is. A lot of people use them interchangeably, but these are really, really key for you to have fully cemented in your mind before you even start to think about putting together a marketing strategy. If you are not all, and by all I mean your team, or if you are not fully cemented with what it is you and your business is trying to do, how on earth are you going to get customers on board with doing that? So number one is your vision. Now, your vision is what it is you want to see if your business is successful beyond your wildest ambition. It is the absolute dream of the perfect world that you see in 10, 20, 30 years' time, what your business wants to set out to do. The mission is simple. It's how you're going to achieve that vision. Your purpose is why you have founded that company, why you get up in the morning. What is it that drives you to create something that creates that vision? And your values is simply what you stand for or against. Things like transparency or ethics or compostable packaging, whatever it is. The next thing you want to talk about when you build your marketing strategy is who is it you're talking to. Now, what I hope is that in the email you got yesterday, you had a look at the marketing strategy template, because we are following a bit of a loose outline. But the goal at the end of the day is that you will be able to go away and fill out that and create yourself a marketing strategy for the rest of this year and hopefully going forward. So whenever I ask my mentees, what is their target market, I will invariably get an answer back along the lines of an 18 to 35-year-old woman or a 45 to 65-year-old bloke. And that's not really a target market, it's a demographic. A target market is quite broad. It's a really broad segment of the population that just shares certain characteristics. In this example, I'm using age, gender. It can be things like, well, generation is a good example, millennials versus Gen Zs, for example. It's very, very broad. I personally don't think it's got a great deal of use. So to break it down a little bit further is your target audience. So when you are talking or marketing to people, which is just having a conversation, really, you want to think about who the audience is within your target market. So say you are sticking with that target market of 18 to 30-year-old women, which is not in any way specific enough. You want to have a think about who it is. Do you want to talk to the 20-year-old woman, the 20 to 25-year-old woman who is still going out to bars every weekend, to use mass generalizations again? Really, however, the gold standard that you want to get to is the persona, which is basically like you've created a little fictional person. It describes everything from where they live to who they are, what they like, what they don't like, where they hang out online. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. Now, the question is, of course, which should you have? And I maintain you should absolutely have all three, because one leads to the other. So I built some examples. Target market. How do you do it? You analyze your product. You understand where it fits in the market. Who does it solve your problem for? What problem are you solving? Who wants it? And where do they sit in that general population? That is where you start to build that 18 to 30-year-old example I built. So if you are, I'm going to use my old company as an example. Atique had a rough target market of the 25 to 35-year-old women, because that was roughly who was buying our products. That audience, so if we're building a target audience, we're taking it down a notch to that little bit more specific. So who do you want to talk to with your specific marketing message? So with Atique, we had lots of different marketing options. So we had the plastic-free bottles side. We had the fair trade ingredients side. We had the charitable donation side. Who did each of those messages resonate with? And therefore, who was the target audience for that piece of marketing material? Now, the persona, this is quite a lot harder, but it is really worth doing. It's also quite a lot of fun because you get to be really creative. But you want to be very careful that you don't start describing yourself, because yes, you are the founder, the CEO, or whatever of your company, but you aren't necessarily your target audience or your target customer. And that's, sometimes you are, but not always. So you want to, if you can, if you have existing sales, the best way to build personas is to use existing research. So you will send out surveys to your customers and ask everything that almost might feel a little invasive. You know, what social media channels do you use? Where do you hang out online? Where do you hang out offline? What kind of things are important to you when you buy a product? What matters to you in terms of packaging? Ask every sort of question that you can have some kind of relevance to your product. At the end of the day, if you can use it, it's useful information. So an example, I have used a very generic green earth smoothie example for you here. They target 25 to 45-year-olds. We don't even have a gender. They live in the States. That is generic to the point of pretty much useless. I mean, the United States should really be treated as 50 separate countries anyway, but that is their target market. The audience, we have narrowed it down a little bit. So we're going to women aged 30 to 40 who are interested in the healthy eating side of things. They're going to have a campaign based around smoothie kits. So that's their specific marketing message. You will have a little bit of information there on where they're likely to be found. But this is where it gets super interesting. Meet sustainable Sarah. And I appreciate that this is generic to the point of almost being a little offensive, but it's to serve a purpose, right? So a persona describes a person. There's a 35-year-old marketing manager based in LA. She has a decent income, she's married with a child, and she's a busy professional who wants to maintain a healthy lifestyle whilst maintaining her career. It details her motivations and goals, because that's all really interesting for you as a marketer. It shows what's important to her. It shows her pain points, you know, so she's limited time, which I think a lot of mothers here and a lot of people in general can resonate with. And it talks about what she is looking for and where she looks for it, which is YouTube, wellness blogs, and Pinterest. That's all incredibly useful information. Now, if you are saying, but I don't have existing audience, I don't have revenue yet, so how am I going to get this information? It's a little bit harder, but you can do it through competitive research and really informed assumptions. But as soon as you start to get that money through the door, that is when you can start asking questions. You can start doing surveys with, even if you've got just 10 customers, because the more data, the better. Next up is you want to analyze where the market is. What is going on with your competitors? What trends are going on? So the three sort of big questions you want to look at is market trends. Now, this is where the likes of ChatGPT are really handy. Now, something to bear in mind is that ChatGPT is only trained on information up to 2021, so it is not quite current, but it's still useful nonetheless because trends are kind of slow-ish. You also want to look at, if you can access them, research reports that are done. The likes of NZTE are really helpful if you are looking at export markets. There is a lot of information out there for you to go and find that you can base some ideas around. Competitive analysis is really interesting. Now, everybody has competitors. Even if you have a world-first product that literally no one has ever created in the history of time, I promise you have competitors because the problem existed beforehand. So I use the example here is, again, a teak shampoo bars, maybe 1-2 other companies I could think of that were doing something even remotely similar at the time. And I remember at my very first pitch, I said, "Oh, we don't have competitors." And one of the judges rightfully pointed out, "Of course you do. You compete with every liquid shampoo on the market." And they're absolutely right. And you need to think about that. So go a little bit broader with your competitor analysis and have a think also about the companies that are in your niche. And by niche, I mean in your price point, talking to the audience that you've already figured out who they are, talking to the market, the audience, the personas that you are going to talk to. And finally, a SWOT analysis. This is also quite a lot of fun. A lot of people shy away from doing this, but this is a really good thing to do, to be really honest and transparent with yourself. What are your strengths? What are your company's strengths? What are the things internally to you as a company that you can capitalize on to really make this exciting? Is it a world-first product? Do you have an amazing brand? Do you have someone on your team who is the world-leading expert on whatever subject matter your product is? What are they? List as many as you can think of. You can't have too many strengths. Same deal with your weaknesses. A lot of people don't like facing this head on, but every company has weaknesses, even the big guys. And if you can face them honestly, list them down, then you are far more likely to be able to tackle them than if you just think, "Oh, that's not really a weakness." It's not a weakness to admit you have a weakness. Opportunities, that's back in the positive column. So what things external to your company can you capitalize on? What about things like, what are market trends, for example, is, think of an example, obviously more and more consumers are looking for sustainable, ethical options. So sustainable, ethical, mission-driven companies are having a really good ride on the back of that consumer change. And that's only going to increase. I don't like using the word trend for that. I think that's a revolution, but that's the kind of example you're looking for. Threats, same thing, but the other way around. What kind of issues outside the company could cause you a problem? I put here economic issues because recession is looming for a lot of the planet. Is that going to cause you problems? And if so, by identifying that, how can you overcome that? How can marketing help you overcome that? How can pricing help you overcome that? Next up, we want to think about marketing objectives. What is it you actually want to achieve? There is a lot of different things you can achieve with marketing. Obviously, everybody thinks about sales as your number one, but sales are obviously important. Cash flow is quite important for a company, but it's not the be all and end all. And I would argue brand awareness is something that a lot of companies ignore. Brand awareness is really key. But you want to make sure that it's a measurable statistic, because brand awareness is measurable. There are things out there, people have vanity metrics, for example, but they're not as easy to allocate to a certain type of marketing as something like brand awareness would be. You can use tools or other organizations that will measure this for you. Another option is something like driving website traffic or conversion, which is sales. You can easily measure that because your website will tell you, you've put the social media post up and all of a sudden you've had this boost to all your pages, or you've put this blog post up and all of a sudden all these people are interested in this certain product. That's something that's easy to measure. And I've already talked about the revenue side of things. Now, people get a bit confused about what a marketing strategy is. A strategy is, well, there's effectively 4. So you've got product strategy. And this is something a lot of people don't think about because you tend to think about your tactics more so. So product strategy is what you're actually selling and why. So things like the development and design and the management of your products, but your range of products, that is all a marketing strategy. So what do you offer and who are they for, and why do you offer that type of product? How are they different to everything else on the market? This is something you should be continually trying to understand and iterate upon, is how you are different and better to everything else on the market. And then, of course, you need to keep an eye on how you think that'll evolve in the future. That will probably just happen naturally, but how will something like your products evolve? Will it grow? Will the product line change? Will you move it into different packaging? There is just an impossible number of opportunities. Pricing. Pricing is marketing. There is lots of different options. So you can have a look at whether are you simply pricing to be the absolute cheapest on the market? That is a marketing opportunity. Are you pricing to be in the premium end? Are you wanting to be the most expensive? There are people out there who will only buy the most expensive version of things, whereas there are people out there who can only buy the most cheap version of things. That is a strategy in itself. Brand also comes from pricing. So if you want to build a more premium brand, you don't want to have a really low price. You want to factor all of these things in when you are thinking about pricing your products, because it is a brand building exercise. And then discounts and promotions. How much are you going to discount? Are you going to constantly have 50% off discounts? Like if you were in grocery, are you going to never ever discount? Which is something that many companies do. For the likes of, I think, Allbirds have never had a discount. What are you going to do, and why will it help you build the brand you're trying to build? Distribution strategy. And my N has fallen off. That's annoying. This is how you're going to get your products to your customers. This is where will you be found? Are you going to be an omni-channel? So that means online and offline. Are you going to be found on your own D2C website and on retail? Are you going to be found in certain retail but not other retail? What and why, and have a really good think about this. I talk a lot about retailer strategy. It's something that's really important, but as early stage entrepreneurs, so many of us get these approaches from a retailer. We don't think whether they're a good fit long-term or even short-term, and we say yes because we're so excited. I fell into that trap 100 million times. It's so important to have a really good think about whether this retailer is worth it, because you can spend a lot of time and a lot of money on working with a retailer that's really not profitable and doesn't help you build the brand. And then finally, you have promotion strategy. Now, this isn't necessarily about discounts. It's about how you're going to promote your brand, how you're going to drive awareness and interest and get people excited and build a brand that people are loyal about and love. So it's everything from advertising and PR and sales and social media and everything else, but it's how you're going to do it and how much you're going to spend. And here are the tactics within each strategy. And I understand at this point, the first time I did one of these, I thought this was all so wordy and excessive, but these are actually things you think about without even knowing you're necessarily thinking about it. And sometimes getting them out of your head is helpful for not only you, but as you build your team, it's something you can hand to your team and they get an understanding immediately of what you do and what you don't do. And arguably what you don't do is more important than what you do. Product tactics. There is a lot more than just the 3 examples I've given you, but again, we have limited time. I want time for questions at the end. Product bundling. You see this a lot on the likes of Amazon. So a good strategy for Amazon and online in particular, particularly if your product is really cheap, it's hard to make it profitable to sell online. So maybe you sell a pack of 5 or a pack of 10, and they can only buy a single perhaps at a certain retail store. Line extensions, something you should be doing with your customers constantly is having a chat with them, understanding what they want, and therefore building products based off that feedback immediately. New flavors or services or an extension to an existing line, whatever it is, that's a product tactic. Limited edition is something you see a lot around holiday periods, whether it's Valentine's Day or Christmas. They're often the same products, to be perfectly honest, but in a pretty package. Something to think about there. I'm not a huge fan of limited edition products a lot of the time because they are really wasteful. They often end up, particularly in Boxing Day sales, for 50% off, and so many of them end up in the bin. So something to think about, because we are mission-driven companies, is to think about that waste aspect when you're creating products as well. Pricing tactics. We have all seen that most prices on the shelves, and this was something that was quite new to me when I started Atique, I just simply hadn't noticed, is that most prices end in 99 cents or 95 cents as opposed to the whole number. This is actually because and even if you think you don't fall for this, your brain does. You naturally think that $9.99 is cheaper than 10, and sure it is, but by a negligible amount. So is that something you want to implement? if you want to implement some psychological pricing, that's not only the 99 cents thing, but there's also things like something that is $19.99 is infinitely cheaper to our mind than something that is just $21. Once it crosses a certain threshold, immediately it's out of the discretionary spending mile. For those of you with services, freemium. Now, you see this in the likes of, I think Netflix are introducing this, where they have their free option where you've got to watch ads, or you have their premium one where you've got no ads. That's a great example of a freemium option. Then you've also got tiered pricing, which is very similar, which is pretty much every software company ever, where you've got your entry level, which has got, you know, your basic features, and then you move through the tiers, you get more and more. Is that something that works for you and your brand? Distribution tactics, exclusivity. This is what I was talking about with picking your retailers. Now, something that's really handy when you move into a new market is picking those retailers that have authority within that market and help you, well, you effectively borrow their authority. And Sephora is a really good example here. If a brand goes into a Sephora, immediately, even people who already know the brand think there is a certain air about it that's that little bit more premium, that little bit more exciting. They know what they're talking about. They're a prestige brand. That is exclusivity, and that is why thinking about your retailer strategy is really important. Why have I written climate change and pollution there? This isn't saved. Wonderful. That's very helpful. Other distribution tactics are whether you're going to be solely online, whether you're going to be in a lot of companies do what you call drop shipping, but they've also got these new tactics in Westfield Mall where you buy something online and you've got the never-ending aisle, which is really cool. You will go into a store and they won't be able to carry the product that you necessarily want because they've only got a certain number of shelves, but you can buy something on a screen in store and it will be delivered to your door before you even get home. There is lots, there's some really, really cool options that you can have a look at. Promotion tactics. This is probably the one that people spend the most time on, and it's definitely the most interesting. Now, I have talked ad lib about public relations. If you've ever seen any of my videos about a tech, I have talked about how PR was absolutely revolutionary for our brand. Now, PR is something you can do yourself, and it's also something that is often, but not always, done better if you hire an agency. It's a lot more than just press releases. It's a lot more than just influencer events with cute flowers and setups like that. PR is a whole strategy within itself. And of course, if things go really wrong, it's also about crisis management. But press will build a brand for you like nothing else. Press will build you not only a long-lasting brand and loyal fans, but it will also help you get in front of things like buyers if you're wanting to get into retailers. Social media. Everybody seems to think that they have to be on every single social media platform, and as a result, they tend to do them badly because you can't be everything to everyone. So you need to go back to your target audience, your target market, and your personas and think, where do the people I actually want to talk to, where do they live? Where do they work? What do they love? Is it Facebook? Because there is a lot of information out there about the audiences on each social media platform. TikTok historically has been a really young person's platform, but is no longer. It's now your average user is quite a lot older than it used to be. It's no longer 18-year-olds. Facebook has an older generation, but actually that also looks like it's changing as well. It's an interesting, constantly changing process, and you need to keep an eye on it, but you do not have to be on every channel. I don't know why anyone is on Twitter. That can't crash up an organization. I actually do see its benefits, but as a brand, is it one you need to prioritize? Influencer marketing. Influencer marketing is something so many of us roll our eyes at, but it can be done really well. It can be done really badly, and there's plenty of organizations who have built their brands entirely on influencer marketing. It is something to think about as to how you want to do it. Do you want to have those long-term relationships with fewer influencers? Do you want to talk to every single person on the planet? Do you only want to offer paid? Do you only want to work with people for free? There is a lot that goes into building an influencer strategy. Paid ads. These are an interesting one. Paid ads, I'm talking the likes of Google search, Facebook, so Meta, so Facebook and Instagram, and now you've got paid on YouTube, obviously TikTok, it goes on and on and on. There is a whole video in this itself, but you need to have a think about what it is that ads do. Now, if your marketing objective is to build brand awareness, paid ads are probably not going to help you there. Paid ads will help sales, and they might eventually move you into the realm of more people knowing about you, but an advert does not inspire loyalty, typically. It does not engender excitement about a brand. So this is where it's important to think about those marketing objectives again, and this is why we did that at the beginning of the strategy. So when you're building this promotion aspect, it's really important to keep going back to look at what you're trying to do and who you're talking to. And with that is content marketing. Often overlooked. It's not considered as something that's really important, but content marketing is amazing. And this is things like blogs, podcasts, it's getting an article on stuff.co.nz, for example, which is easier than you might think. It's getting your name out there. Arguably it's TikTok videos because TikTok is an outreach platform. It's YouTube videos because YouTube is an outreach platform. It is, if you are an expert or you have expertise or you just want to talk about something, you should write it down, you should video it, you should get it on a podcast, and you should get it on your website. And the more often you can do that, the better. Print media. I have never paid for a print advert in my life. I don't think it's dead, but it's also an expensive industry. And for certain brands, it definitely has payoff. But you really need to think again, who is your audience? Are they the glossy magazine readers, and are they going to be excited by a full page spread that cost you 40 grand, or is there a more cost effective way you can reach them? However, if you are a lawn mowing business and a local and you want to advertise in the West Mountain newsletter, for example, could be an absolutely perfect fit. And then there is traditional media, and I have been told numerous times that this is dead, but to use an example, so Atik ran its first and only yet TV ad last year. I hope some of you saw it. I'm very proud of it. And it increased our sales by 30% and that continued on throughout after it was shown. It also increased brand awareness by about 18%, and that's not a lot, but we already have decent brand awareness in New Zealand. Now, it was expensive. It was about $120,000, but it was something that was really interesting and well worth doing for us. And now we come to marketing budget. I can't tell you what this is. This is entirely up to you. But you want to ensure that you've got foundation set first. You want to ensure that you have realistic understanding of what your marketing dollars are going to get you. Because if you go in there and you've got two people, perhaps you've got a board who are expecting the world set on fire for a budget of 10 grand, you're going to have a bad time immediately. So make sure you know what your objectives are, and you've had a look about anything if you've done historically, even if it's just organic social media, what's worked, what's resonated with the audience, what's resonated with that persona you want to reach, and have a look if you can add that in to determine that total budget, and have a look as to see whether you want to do some gating. So say you lump your year into quarters, and if you've achieved your targets of that first month or that first quarter, then yes, we can go ahead with the marketing plan for the second quarter because we know what we did in that first quarter worked. We have understood the analytics, we've understood that to set those goals. So yes, let's move on to the next step, and we will spend that money again, and hey, maybe we'll spend more. Prioritize. Now, I won't imagine I'm talking to anyone here with an unlimited marketing budget. I have never had an unlimited marketing budget, and it's depressing because there's so many things I want to go and do. You have to think about what it is that you're going to get the best bang for your buck. Usually this is where paid ads wins, because everybody can immediately go paid ads to sales. And unfortunately, they're not wrong. If you do a good ad, you could probably get a good sale out of it. But that's not all that marketing is. It's about brand awareness, it's loyalty, it's building that brand, which will have so much more of a long-term benefit. And that is something you've really got to consider. So prioritize what's important. Maybe sales are 50% of your budget, but the other 50% is more about brand awareness. And that goes into your organic social or your PR. And then the other side of that is you want to ensure that you continually monitor and track those initiatives, because you don't want to be spending, I don't know, 50 grand a month on your paid ads. You're only getting $25,000 in sales. Certainly isn't worth it. And I know plenty of companies who are anything but profitable because they simply didn't understand their marketing numbers. Something to watch out for. KPIs. Now, we talk about measuring success a lot. And this can be really tricky with certain objectives. Brand awareness can be a tricky one to do. So revenue, it's an easy one. We did this on this month and it increased sales by 30%. When let's do more of it. It's a nice, easy one, but not everything will lead to that. Brand awareness is a trickier one to measure, but there are tools out there. There's a company called Tracksuit in New Zealand. It's a startup. It's just raised so many $1 million. It's one of our success stories. They will measure your brand awareness for you. They will also understand why people are talking about you and general brand sentiment, but there's a plethora of tools and other organizations who will do this for you. Brand awareness measurement can be expensive, so you can also get an idea of it yourself simply by sending out some anonymous surveys, and there are ways to do that. And then there are other performance, particularly if you're doing ads, you want to have a look at your customer acquisition cost. You'll commonly hear that referred to as CAC. How much does it cost you to get that customer? Because I hope it's a lot less than their lifetime value. And that is how a lot of companies like the Dollar Shave Club, for example, have fallen over. Finally, well, not quite finally, but you want to have a marketing calendar. Now, this is a very basic idea. You want to be a lot more specific. In January, we're not only launching a social campaign, but we're going to kick off a 3-month PR campaign because we've just launched this new product. And then we're going to follow it up with an influencer campaign. And then you're tax and paid ads on the end. Then you want to make sure that by the time February rolls around, you've had a look at some of those performance metrics, because then you want to double down on it, or you want to stop doing the things that are working whilst you're also adding something new in for February. Perhaps you're excited about Valentine's Day, whatever it is. And then in the next month, you want to have a look at launching something else. I've put a TV commercial for the sake of argument, but you want to also ensure that everything you are doing is tying into everything else. So a lot of companies will have this big social campaign or a huge influencer campaign, but they won't support it with anything else on their website. The companies that do marketing the best ensure that everything they are doing visually for the consumer all ties in together, and then it works really nicely. Contingency plan. What are you going to do if it doesn't work? This is a really grim side of things, but what are you going to do if you put all this money into a TV commercial and it didn't spike any sales? Hopefully that never happens, because that would be a hideous waste of money, but it's possible. So what you need to have a think about here is our social channels aren't resonating. We've not got any engagement and we're not gaining followers. So why might that be? That would be the kind of thing you want to have go back and have a look at your personas. Are they completely wrong? Possibly. Therefore, the information we're putting out on our social channels isn't helpful. It isn't interesting to our audience. So is our audience correct? If they are, and you've got that information from the people who are buying from you or the people who are following you on social, what about your objectives? Are you measuring the wrong thing? Are you trying to get the wrong thing? Are sales perhaps too far down the track? Should you simply be trying to get some brand awareness, or even simply people, you want to gather some leads? What is it that you're doing wrong, or what is it that you're doing right that you need to do more of? It is important to have a contingency plan. You'll note I have left a room for it in the template that is emailed through. Now, I have blazed through that because I see there's a couple of questions. And again, I really would like you to talk about this, to ask questions, because this isn't the kind of thing, if you've never done it before, that's necessarily going to be easy to do. But hopefully you've had a look at that template. You can go through it and build it. And please do email it to me. I'd really like to see them. And if you email it to me, I will send you some feedback. Okay, so Kate, you have asked a question about sustainable marketing. No print, i.e. posters. What about QR codes? I dislike business cards. I haven't had a business card in, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, despite the fact that many people have continually tried to print them for me within the company. I see absolutely no point in a business card for me. So you have to ascertain what is worth it for you, because again, who is your audience? If you are talking to an older school generation who like to have that piece of paper, if you're talking to a culture that likes business cards and it's part of their formal introduction process, for example, Japan, then maybe you need a business card. It's entirely situation specific. QR codes are a great one. They are something that actually we can thank COVID for, because more people are now aware of what they can do. Silver lining, I suppose. But it is a great way of something to put on your packaging. It will give them a whole lot more information if they scan it. Something you can put on your shelf if you've got a retailer. If you've got, I don't know, a really, really small product, that we've got QR codes in our newer teak packaging that just takes you to understand so much more of our brand. It will also take you to a video if you want to tie it into like a TV campaign or a social campaign. All of these things, printing a QR code, linking to a QR code, that's free. And then all you need to do is plaster it everywhere. That is an option. Sustainable marketing is an interesting one. In general, marketing by and large can be incredibly wasteful. So when you are thinking about a new campaign, you want to ensure that your product the waste comes from producing too much of a product. And if your campaign fails, what are you going to do with it? That's why I'm not actually a fan of limited edition products for that reason. So it is something to bear in mind. Charlotte has asked, how do you measure brand awareness? Good question. Other companies will do it for you, but it's effectively, have you heard of this brand? So there's prompted and unprompted surveys out there. So someone will go through and they've asked the question, have you heard of these brands? I'll tick yes, but they've written the name of your brand. So you'll be alongside other competitors in that market. And they ask, say, 1,000 people, and you can ask people who you've interacted with, which might be an odd thing to do, but it's what they do, and people who are just general pop. The other thing they can do is an unprompted one. And to me, that's more important, because what you want is to know whether your brand rises to people's brains unbidden, without any kind of prompting at all. And they'll simply ask, who are your top 5 favorite brands, or your top 5 favorite cosmetic brands, or whatever it is. And you will understand whether anybody's heard of you before. I know, for example, that New Zealand, that Atique used to have a 2% brand awareness in the United States. And I considered that a massive win because of how little marketing we could afford to do there, versus how many people are actually in the market. I thought 2% was an absolute win. I was delighted with that. Just joking. Okay. What are media looking for started? Cool. Media for PR. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen so you can see me a little bit easier. What are media looking for? So media, you've got to think about it whenever you're doing anything. You want to think about it from the perspective of the person that you want something from. What does a journalist want from a brand in order to talk about it? They want it to be interesting. They want it to be something that will draw eyes. That's why clickbaity headlines are so popular, unfortunately. So you have to think about it from their perspective. What is interesting to their reader? So say you want to be in a particular outlet. You want to be, say, on Stuff. So Stuff is typically more left-leaning, centre left-leaning. They talk a lot about new business. They talk a lot about more environmental issues and daily news. So what have you got in your communications kit that will fall into the interest levels of those readers? Can you talk about how your products are world first? Can you talk about how your product is solving some kind of sustainability issue? Because the other aspect you want to think about is a hook, is something that is really exciting from the get-go for the reader, for the reporter, because a reporter will get 50 to 100 requests to write a story a week, if not a day. How are they going to search through that to write a story? And they are more overworked than ever before. So they have really got to sort the wheat from the chaff. So you want to stick out. I have a press release template that you can have a look at, but the very first thing in that headline and that subject is, what is the hook? What makes it exciting? Is this a world first product? Is this solving this problem? Is this going to set the world on fire, and why? Have you got some amazing statistics? So they're looking for a hook. They're looking for something exciting that will get their readers excited. And that's the way to think about it. Even if you don't think what you're doing is particularly new, how can you make it appealing to the reader? Because that's what the journalist wants. I had someone on TikTok ask me the other day, if you already have to have a presence to get on social media, and it's absolutely not the case. But you do have to have a hook. So you can start drafting thoughts down on what makes you and your company different or exciting or new. And you never know what you'll stumble across. And actually, to use ChatGPT again, that will give you, if you just ask it, what are some interesting hooks from press releases, it will give you some examples. I'm just reading your question, Jessica. That's a great point. So Jessica has pointed out what happens if you are so successful that you can't keep up with demand. Now, I had a story about that. Have you ever heard me talk about the time Atique went viral? It was 2015. It was my mum and 2 other team members and I. We could make 50 bars a day, and we went viral around the world, where we appeared from a press release. Actually, no, sorry, it was from an interview that happened in Forbes that was picked up by the Huffington Post and then promptly went viral all around the world. And that is actually where a lot of people have heard of Atique from right back then. I woke up the morning to hundreds and hundreds, actually hundreds of thousands of orders and emails and phone calls and messages on social media. And everyone says, oh, wow, that's so exciting. And it was, but we also cried all day, every day for weeks. I had to draft in volunteers simply to answer emails. I had to draft in a lady who I will never, ever be able to say how much I appreciate what they did. just to answer the phone. It is something to be concerned about because it's possible. It's unlikely, though, to be realistic. That is probably something that will never happen to me again. I'm a little bit grateful, to be fair, but it was incredibly useful. It was very difficult. It's also probably not something to worry about because scarcity is not a big deal. If you run out of a product, or if you are so successful that you can't supply, all you need to do is be honest and transparent. And I actually think customers love that, because we had to go back out to the 98% of those people who'd ordered from us, most from the States, and say, not only are we not really shipping to you guys, it'll take 20 days, we can't provide these bars for you. It was also about 3 months before Christmas, and everyone was ordering Christmas products. We simply couldn't do it. But we went back to them, we were transparent and honest about it, and they have remained customers. So even when we got them their orders maybe 6 months later, the fact that they knew about it, understood why, meant we retained them. So it's a concern, but it can be managed. But it's also unlikely, is my other thing. There's a few examples of companies that have gone viral from articles in the Huffington Post. Bite toothpaste is another one. She talks about it, or she talked about it a couple of years ago when she appeared. I think they caught her on a social media post of all things. So that's also something to consider, is media will look at your social and often reshare it. And she had to go and build a factory, but it's doable. Lewis Creamery is a great example, whether it was a PR stunt or not. They did an absolutely beautiful job of making it look like we needed security guards for chocolate milk. And hey, it's served them well in the long run. Do the same marketing strategies apply if you're selling a product/service to other companies and not consumers? Yes, absolutely. At the end of the day, a business is still a consumer. You still want to understand who it is you're talking to. So you still want to go through the same steps. You want to understand who they are and what they're looking for and what problems they want to solve. You want to understand where they live. Are you going to go and cold call them all? Are you going to find them on certain online something or other? Are you going to find them at networking events? Where will you find them? That's really important to know. And then you work through exactly the same process. What kind of marketing messages are they going to be looking for? And how will you tailor it to them? How are you going to measure the success of that? It's exactly the same thing, but the messaging will be different. Sarah, what should we never do with social media? It really depends on your brand. Now, I have a very good friend in Australia who is not afraid of social media and doing anything on it. And she will do anything to get press and media. And it has backfired on her on numerous occasions, but she always comes out of it smelling like roses. She is that kind of person who's always managed to do well. That would cause me endless amounts of stress, and I simply couldn't do it. In my opinion, there's a couple of things you want to avoid, which is slagging off competitors. I know a lot of companies do it. I think it always looks bad. It makes you look churlish and like you can't compete in a nice way. What's the political saying? We don't go low, we go high. I personally believe that's the case. You want to ensure that you never do something that's counter to your values, whether it's, and that this happens a lot. You will see companies that are all about self-esteem photoshopping their photos, or you will see companies that are, I don't know, a plastic-free company, and then they are producing all this waste with their commercial or their social campaign or an influencer event. It's really important, and that's why I talk about values being so key at the very beginning of this document. I have been talking for too long this evening. It's really important to ensure those values flow through everything you do, otherwise it comes across as really inauthentic, and that's not building a brand, that's just building a whole series of problems for you later on. So beyond sort of ensuring you've got consistency in values, don't slag off the competition, you also want to remember that you are talking to the world, potentially. Anything you put on social media can go anywhere. So you don't ever want to put anything on that you wouldn't be comfortable with your parents seeing. I think that's always a good rule. Now, something that I never really realized this. Years ago, I won an award before we were even a real business, and they brought me over to Washington, and I was put up in this fancy hotel, and I was so excited. I took a selfie of me in a dressing gown, which isn't typically something I would ever post. I put it on Instagram because I had, like, I don't know, 100 friends on there at the time. Not a big deal. It's somehow found its way to Google, and it's still on there now. It will be forever, and I don't really care. But if I'd been the type of person to worry about that being online, then I'd be really annoyed about it now. So always think about, if I put this on, would I be upset if my parents saw it, or my grandparents, or whoever? And if you don't care, great. You be you. Biggest marketing regret. What's been my biggest marketing regret to date? That's a good question. Paid media, actually. We spent historically, a lot of money on meta advertising because of that link, as I was talking about earlier, from advertising straight to sales. We never set the objectives in the beginning, which was to build brand awareness alongside sales. We didn't have that priority, and we should have done. And it was this is definitely a mistake that I've learned from. So we spent pretty much all of our marketing budget on paid media. I didn't like this from day one, but I also understood that the person who was running that was a lot more experienced than I was. And I deferred to that. And this is also where I say that you should always speak up and have an opinion. Even if you don't think you belong in that room, I promise you belong in that room. And spending all that money, and you would have been in the millions in the end. That's probably my biggest regret, because we could have done so much with that. And yes, it did engender far more sales than we spent, but we could have done so much more with that would have created a brand for a longer term look. Marketing should always be long term, never, ever, ever the short term, quarter by quarter corporate way of looking at things, in my opinion. Is there an algorithm with EDM marketing? So EDM is newsletters. No, not to my understanding, but certainly some of your newsletters will go to spam in various inboxes. My experience is that Google is the worst for this. They are so good at determining promotions and spam that they will put everything in your spam folder before you get a chance to have a look at it. You can play with those settings if you like. There are ways around it. So trying to make sure your things like your domain is verified. Using a good platform to send things out, so MailChimp is a good one, Klaviyo is another. There are other. If you use a good platform, and to be fair, most of them are out these days, they have inbuilt systems that try and avoid those spam filters. But a subject line is really key, making sure it's not something like, get your 50% off code right now, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, is the kind of thing that will set a spam filter off. So you want it to be a little bit more conversational, less buy my stuff, which a newsletter shouldn't be anyway. Newsletter should be not just selling stuff. A newsletter should be inviting you and giving you value and building that brand again, because EDMs are your number one most valuable marketing tool. I'm actually losing my voice. I don't know why. I talk all the time. Talking about EDMs, which I haven't talked about in here, which is a bit of an oversight actually, they're probably my favorite marketing tool, because they are the most valuable return on investment you'll ever get, almost without fail. On average, for a Teak's online sales, 45% of it comes from EDMs. Now, we can always improve that for sure, but thank you. My mother has just brought me water because she's on the call before I die. So you should always be trying to get leads, and it's a big marketing objective. I haven't used it as an example much because it's actually something I'm going to run a masterclass on specifically, is EDMs and newsletters, because they're so powerful if you use them. Even if you have an audience of just 500 people and you've got 500 people you're sending a weekly newsletter out to, the return on investment is astonishing. So if there's something I can leave you with today, go and collect leads. And by that, I simply mean whether you have a pop-up on your website. So I hate pop-ups more than anything. I don't have a pop-up on my website. A Teak does now. I hate it. But they are really effective. I have to say, they are really, really good at getting people to give you their email address. You offer a discount or whatever it is, get people's email addresses, and then you can start emailing them. They are a very effective tool. So you can do it on social as well through something similar. You can point people to, you can put people to a link in your bio and use something like ConvertKit, which is a thing that will build you a landing page simply to collect leads, which is really useful. Okay, Jessica, if you're going to measure brand awareness, do you need a baseline, or is it safe to assume that there is? Yes, this is the perfect question that I should have talked about more. Yes, you need to measure a baseline. So if you're going to a TV ad, you need to measure it before the TV ad and after, unless you don't really have much of a presence. So if you're a fairly new business, you're 2-3 years old, you've done social, you've got 10,000, 20,000 people, you can probably assume, even in a country the size of New Zealand, that your brand awareness is fairly low. So you can probably not worry about measuring beforehand. You can always assume there's a good uplift afterwards, or if you do a big social campaign, there's an uplift afterwards. However, if you are more established in the market, or if you've recently run a big campaign, or if you're found in a grocery store, which is a massive brand awareness tactic, then you probably want to measure something beforehand. Absolutely, because otherwise, how will you know if it's worked? It's a very, very good point. And again, companies that usually measure that brand awareness for you will do it beforehand. So it's usually something you can tack on nice and easily. That is my last question. Do we have any final questions? Oh, yes. Has your target market evolved? Yes, your target, your personas, they should always evolve. So I first was introduced to the idea of personas, I think it would have been 2014. Atik was founded in 2012. And for those 2 years, I was really just falling over myself, figuring out how to get product made and everything else and coping with the demand. So I wasn't worried about marketing. Then I met a marketing specialist who taught me all about personas. And that was when we first did those. And we had 5 of them. We narrowed the target market at the time, I think, which I had was the 18 to 35-year-old woman. And then narrowed that down to 5 personas. There was I think there was hippie chick, as she called them. There was a mum, and then there was a couple more, and they all drilled right down into those behavioural specifics, and that was really useful. But they didn't translate into other markets, and that's the interesting point. Is they may stay similar in the same market if you as a company don't evolve too much, but if you become Atik was very niche. But then we moved into more mass as we moved into grocery. So immediately our customers changed. But rather than removing or changing our personas, we added to them. So we have more. We dropped off a couple of them who weren't as relevant anymore, but we kept those 3 main ones and added some that you would find more likely in your mass markets. We've got completely different personas for the likes of America, because people there want different things. They have different motivations for purchasing. They lurk in completely different places online. So yes, your target markets, your personas must evolve. I'm not saying you need to do this massive piece of marketing every 6 months, every year to understand who is buying from you, but having an annual survey to see if that information, if the age group, if the demographic, if where they live online, if that remains the same with what you are currently doing, I think that's a really important thing to understand. So having an annual survey is a really good aspect of understanding your customer. But that's also the kind of information you'll get if you, as the founder, as the CEO, whatever, if you spend time with your customers through customer service, through social media. I think I said the other day, for the last 10 years, this is the first week I've not done it. For the last 10 years, every single day I've gone onto our customer service software and I've had a look to see if there's any unifying factors, if there's any issues, if there's something people want to ask about, because we can immediately tailor our conversation around it. And I can't overestimate how important it is you stay really close to your customer. Do you see any merit in sometimes not asking your customers what they want via surveys and delivering what you want to provide and capturing the customers who fit? 100%. Yes. Now, we talk a lot about solving a customer's problem, but a lot of the time customers don't know. And that's not a slight on customers or us. It's simply we don't actually know we have a problem until someone says, well, why don't you do it that way? And you think, oh, genius, right? A great example spoke about by a not so great person was Henry Ford. And he famously said, if I had asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses rather than cars, right? And that's simply because they couldn't possibly imagine what a car is, how it would fit. I mean, an example was, we didn't know we wanted computers until we had them, and phones. I very clearly remember telling, I think it was my parents, that touchscreens wouldn't go anywhere because they were such a pain in the ass to use. I hated them and I never wanted them. You know, now we all have touchscreens. So a lot of the time, yes, we can't see past what we currently have and the issues we currently face. So yes, absolutely. The best marketing, the best focus groups, I hate focus groups. The best thing you can do is sell your product. Get it out there, get real paying customers, not people who've got it for free, not the same. Paying customers, what they think, what they like, and what they would do better. I mean, refund them if they hate it. You know, you should have an absolute fabulous, flawless customer guarantee, but get them to pay for it, because then they will give you their honest feedback, and you just can't beat it. Putting people in a room, nonsense. And that is my last question. So we've got 6 more minutes just in case anyone else has anything burning. I hope that's been really helpful. This is the first time I've ever done a masterclass. It was a little bit more, it went a little faster than I anticipated, but I just wanted to keep the group small because I want people to ask questions and feel comfortable being recorded, understanding what's going on. So any final questions before we log off for the evening. And thank you for putting up with the date change and putting up with the late hour. I think this is the time that seems to suit people the best. I'm going to do a countdown. Dun, 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 dun. Thank you again. I really appreciate you spending the evening with me. I will forward this recording on. What happened to the Dollar Shave Club? Very interesting question. I actually recommend you go and read about this. It's really interesting. Dollar Shave Club did the most amazing marketing video I've ever seen. Go on YouTube. I adore it. It was actually what we based one of the Antique's first ever ads off because it was so wonderful. Cost them $4,000 and they catapulted. They were simply producing razors without the nonsense, you know, with the 14 turbocharged laser edged razor thing that Gillette goes on about, right? There were razors without bullshit. And they turned over something insane. They were sold to Unilever for $2 billion after 4 years in operation. It's got to be one of the fastest unicorns in the history of unicorns. And now they're worthless because, unfortunately, and this was pre-Unilever, but they should have found this in the due diligence, they weren't in any way, shape, or form profitable. And this is really common with D2C-only brands. So this is when I'm talking about CAC, customer acquisition cost. It was costing them, say, $100 to acquire a customer, but the customer would only spend $10 with them on average over their entire lifespan as a customer. So you're losing $90 every time you bring a customer on board. That is the only way you can ever prop that up is by constantly throwing money into it, an investment. And that is what a lot of D2C brands do today. And that is why a lot of D2C brands are moving into retail stores. It is not the wonderful outlet that we all thought it was. I always wanted Atique to be D2C only because I loved having that control of that customer and being able to make sure they had the best possible experience, because when you work with retailers, you lose a lot of that control, and it has it comes with some downsides. Most retailers are wonderful, but it definitely comes with some downsides. And I was very quickly made to realize that D2C is not be all and end all. So, but I would go and read about it. It's really fascinating about what to and what not to do. Yeah. Okay, thank you again. I will send you this recording probably in half an hour or so when it's finished rendering or whatever it does. And yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.